Hey everybody, so today I'm going to be doing a Q&A video for some of my common questions that have been answered online and for like streams and stuff, so that they'll all be in one whole video and stuff. So I put annotations in the description, hopefully, of the timestamp of when I'm answering these questions. So hopefully you guys can just skip through it if you want to know the answer to a question that you want to know only and not listen to a rant. Alright, so the first question is, what made you interested in astronomy? And this question here is going to basically answer the question for, I believe, number 10 that I'll read. What made me interested in astronomy is I wanted to know if there was life out there in the universe and stuff, and I wanted to, explore the universe from my own backyard, and basically see the discoveries of what our universe has to offer, and that's why one of the reasons why I got into astronomy. I also got more interested in doing astrophotography as well. I've seen that a lot of my friends and family are really have a busy life. They don't get to enjoy some of the good things in life just because they have a real busy life and whatnot. So I try to go out and image these things for the world to see, as well as other people in the world who may have a really busy life and they don't get to go out and see the wonders of the universe that the world has to offer. What telescope do you recommend for starting out or to see the rings of Saturn? Well, that's a good question, because this will answer number 3 a little bit too. So it depends on your budget. If you're on a tight budget, I'd possibly recommend probably a Dobsonian telescope. Dobsonians are the best bang for the buck when it comes to being able to gather a lot of light. The downfall to a Dobsonian is that they have mirrors, and the mirrors, if they're banged around, they get knocked out of alignment, basically. And you have to collimate them, and it can be a little tricky for the first time doing a collimation, but once you got it patented down, you're pretty much good to go for the rest of the time. They also, the bigger the Dobsonian, the bigger the mirror on the actual telescope, requires a longer cool down time. So if you keep your telescope stored inside your house where the temperature is a lot different from the outside, so if your inside is really cold and the outside is really humid in the 90s or so, then it's going to fog up the mirror, and the mirror has to cool down to the outside temperature. Otherwise, stuff will look really washed out, and yeah. And that's the same thing with collimation too. If you're not careful with collimation, you can notice that stars don't look good and they're a little bit off, and it's just really hard to explain. But you'll know a telescope that's collimated from a telescope that isn't collimated. Dobsonians are really, some of these are not really made for astrophotography. So if you wanted to get a Dobsonian to do astrophotography with, unless it had some type of tracking on it or really good tracking, then that's probably not something you'll be able to do astrophotography with. And the other reason is most of these Dobsonians have a focuser that is the mirror is back into the focuser, so it's a little hard for you to be able to get a camera close enough to that mirror to project light to the camera. The next question is, what telescope is good for astrophotography? Well, here's the thing about that. Just about, and I'm saying this about just about any telescope is capable of doing astrophotography. One thing that you got to watch out for is you want a telescope that has a low focal ratio. And by low focal ratio, I mean a telescope that's nice and short, has a fast ability to gather light and stuff. Something I'll give you an ideal is roughly 6.3 focal ratio would be pretty good. Anything that's like above like a f 7.5 to like an f11, those are really slow telescopes, and they got a really long focal length on them, chances are, so they're not really good for astrophotography. The best thing that you can do is however much money you got, you're looking at possibly $1,500 unless you buy stuff used. The best thing that I can tell you is put your money, like a lot of the guys say, where your mount is. The better mount that you can get, you're going to want like a German equatorial mount that has the ability to track. And by that, I mean a go-to mount. And a good example is a Celestron AVX mount. That's basically, I think, a good entry-level mount. You can do up to about a 60-second exposure unguided with that mount. And I use I'll get into that in a little bit, but you're gonna want a telescope, the actual optical tube, and this is just my personal preference. A lot of guys will say otherwise, but if I was gonna do it all over again, I would go with a triplet, a refractor that is a triplet. And the best thing I can tell you is go with one. The refractor itself, the actual optical tube, will have OPA on it, which basically means that it's good for astrophotography. It's somewhat good for astrophotography. You're gonna want one that has like a low f-stop, which is basically which is what I messed up on earlier. I said focal ratio, but the focal ratio is also true too. But the f-stop, which is the f/ in it, you're gonna want one that's at least 6.5 or lower, and that would be an ideal actual optical tube. As far as the mount is really important too, but also the actual optical tube is important too, because if you have a higher f-stop, which, as I was saying, if it's like a f11 or higher, or f10 or f9, those are not good telescopes to use for long exposures and stuff. You're not going to get, I doubt you'll get anything good. Maybe you could. It might be good for planetary imaging if you wanted to image Saturn and Jupiter. Those are pretty good, I should say, because the better the focal ratio. It depends on what you're going to be imaging, I should say too. If you're going to want to image the planets only, you'll want probably a longer focal ratio, which means like the Power Seeker 80 EQ is a good really good entry-level telescope. I know a lot of people don't like it, but if you can find a used Power Seeker 80 EQ and get yourself a nice mount, if you could find like an Orion Star Seeker 4 that's used, that would be a good entry-level mount. However, that mount is an all-azimuth mount, so you're going to be limited just to the planets. I've done astrophotography with that type of mount. However, it's just not enough. It just doesn't have the ability to track good, and you're basically looking at really short exposures, because the way the mount tracks is it tracks in azimuth, but also it has to go up like this, and then it has to go like this, and it has to go up like this, and it goes up like this, and it goes up like this. So it's causing field rotation, I guess you could say, because of the way the mount is tracking. I don't know if it's the right term to say field rotation, but the way the mount needs to be going is it needs to be going like this, you know what I mean? So it's going straight across. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but the way an equatorial mount goes is it follows the Earth's rotation, which is kind of funny because it only has a focus on one axis rather than having to focus on two with an alt-azimuth mount. I know it's a little over your head, but you'll get the point. The only thing you really have to worry about is that alt-azimuth mounts are okay for planetary imaging. So if you wanted to image, Saturn, Mars, Jupiter. The sun is kind of good too, but I should say, warning: never look at the sun without a solar filter, and you should always check your solar filters before you use them, because you could damage your telescope and also go blind. So yeah. I rented long enough on a telescope for astrophotography, but I wanted to make that covered because it's really important that you put your money where your mount is, and look for an optical tube that is a triplet, an ED triplet. ED80s are, from what I heard, a really good telescope. I'll tell you on number 4, which is the next question. Number 4 is, what telescopes do you own? And I currently own a Celestron Power Seeker 80 EQ. It was the first telescope I ever started out with, and it was an okay telescope. I did a little astrophotography with it, planetary imaging and whatnot. And I got some pretty good results with Saturn. But the thing is that mount is a German equatorial mount. It's a manual drive telescope, which means that you manually have to move it. The motor on it isn't so great, so you're looking at having to get a different mount if you're going to use the Power Seeker 80 EQ. And I have a 8-inch Dobsonian Skywatcher. It's I hardly use it. Actually, I'm selling it. I'm trying to sell it because I want to get one of these other Orion telescopes. I know a lot of the guys say that they're more hassle than they are, but I think it's probably a good telescope myself. It's basically one of these push-to telescopes. It allows you to manually move the actual telescope, the base itself, or the azimuth of the Dobsonian, which is on a base, and it has on the controller, it has numbers, and you want to zero them all out. And once you're at all zeros, you're basically should be on your target that you're looking for. So if you were looking for Saturn, you didn't know where Saturn is, you ask the controller to find Saturn, and then it'll tell you to move the telescope in a direction, left, right, up, down, and as you go in the right direction, the numbers go lower. As you go off the direction, it goes higher. So it seems like it's easy to work for me. I also have which is basically my pride and joy, is my Explore Scientific AR102 doublet. It's an achromatic refractor. That's the one I basically use for my astrophotography. I want to jump over to another telescope before I forget about this. I have the Celestron Nexstar 5 SE. That's also a all azimuth type mount, and the actual tube itself is a Schmidt-Cassegrain. Basically, it's kind of, the Schmidt-Cassegrain is kind of like a Dobsonian in a way. It's basically like a Newtonian. It has a mirror. It has 2 mirrors. It basically has a big mirror in the back, and it has a small mirror in the front. And what it does is it takes light from the front of the telescope, and it hits a big mirror in the back, and it bounces it frontwards to a mirror that's in the front. And then there's a little tube inside of the telescope that bounces it through a little tube into the back of the eyepiece and then up into the eyepiece. And that's basically how a Schmidt-Cassegrain works. Rather than a Dobsonian basically takes light from the front of the tube, bounces it back, and then it throws it into a mirror in the front, and then it projects it into the eyepiece. So it's kind of close to each other, except one is going into a tube, the other one's bouncing a mirror and then going into the focuser, into the eyepiece. And yeah. So that, and as I was saying, I have a Explorer Scientific AR102 doublet achromatic refractor. The only downfall to this refractor is that it suffers from chromatic aberration, which is basically a bluish, purplish halo around stars and the planets. So when you're doing imaging, if you looked at some of my imaging on juststargazing.com, I've done some recent images about sometime in July of 2017. You can see some of the stars have like a purplish bluish halo around them. That's not always normal. I have to get a filter to correct that. It's about $120 filter to correct that, so that the bluish purple halo isn't around the planets and also around the stars. So I got finished with how many telescopes do I own. I think I covered that. So what software do I use for processing? Currently I use Deep Sky Stacker. I use Backyard EOS for my DSLR. Basically, the Backyard EOS allows me to control everything with my camera, such as the exposures, the ISO, the shutter speed, and yeah. So I use Backyard EOS, and also it helps with focusing too, because I can get a live preview of focusing on a star and make sure that the star is nicely shaped, and yeah. So I use Backyard EOS, and Deep Sky Stacker is basically a software after I do a bunch of pictures with Backyard EOS, light frames, dark frames, biased frames. I hardly ever do flat frames. Actually, I haven't done any flat frames, to be honest. I might do those if I can really find a reason to do them. But yeah, it allows you to do all that, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else special it allows you to do. You can. It says you can do planetary capturing, and I don't really want to go into that because I use something else for number 7 that I'll be answering next. But yeah, so the software that I use is basically Deep Sky Stacker, Backyard EOS, and I also use PixInsight, and as well as I use Photoshop to enhance it a little bit more. But PixInsight is a really good software for processing your images and stuff if you do them in with a DSLR. Now we're going to get on to what kind of camera do I use. So I use a DSLR for now, but I plan to get a CCD camera, and I use a Canon 450D, and I self-astro modded it. Basically, I took out the infrared cut filter that is in front of the sensor, and basically had to disassemble the whole DSLR and put it back together after I took the infrared cut filter off of it. And that's the camera that I use. I also use a Celestron Next Image 5 camera. That's basically just for planetary imaging. You really can't do deep space with that camera. It just doesn't have the ability to do that. But if I was, and I do plan to get a ZWO ASI 120 MC for my future astrophotography. It's about $170 to $200 CCD camera. And I don't know how well it's going to work out for wide field capturing. I think the DSLR does a lot better for the whole capturing and stuff. But yeah, those are the cameras that I use and going to get. And what telescope do I use for astrophotography? So here's the thing. I recently got a Celestron AVX mount, and I paid about $160 for it, thanks to Orange County Telescope for working out a payment plan for me to buy it. And that's the mount that I use, and that's a really good entry-level mount, or mid-level, I should say, mid-level, moderate mount for astrophotography. There's better ones out there. But there are a lot more, and yeah, so the AVX mount is just fine, you know. It's a real beast. It's a heavy motor drive. I normally have to take it out in a couple of parts because it's pretty heavy to disassemble, and you can't take it out unless you were a bodybuilder. But yeah, I use an AVX mount, and I use my Explore Scientific AR102 doublet achromatic refractor, and and that's what I use. Those are the type of things that I use for astrophotography, mountain and telescope wise. Some of the conspiracy, I guess you could call these conspiracy questions that people ask me a lot is, do I think the Earth is flat? No, I don't think it's flat. I'm pretty sure that our Earth is a sphere. Unless somebody has evidence to prove that the Earth is flat. I mean some solid evidence. I mean some pictures that were taken from space that you have. Feel free to send them to me. See, NASA has done has shown evidence to prove the proof, whether they're fake or not. It doesn't really matter. They've showed evidence. I've never seen anybody show any proof that the Earth is flat. You know what I mean? Nobody has seen any evidence of. People say it's flat because they've seen some pictures from NASA that makes the Earth look like it's flat. But from what I know and what I've seen from observing, these planets are sphere in shape. So that leads me to believe that the Earth is a sphere as well. I've been thinking of some things that I could think of to prove that the Earth was a sphere rather than it being flat, but I can't think of anything geniusly. I mean, every once in a while at night I think about how can I prove that the Earth is a sphere and not flat to a lot of these flat Earth believers. But yeah, I don't believe the Earth is flat. The next question is, do I believe in ETs or life elsewhere in the universe? And you know what? I do. I've done a lot of research on extraterrestrials and stuff like that. And, I got in a little bit. This was one of the reasons I got into astrophotography and astronomy in general, is to try to see if there's life out there. You never know. I always believe strongly that if there was going to be any evidence that proves that there's extraterrestrials or intelligent life out there, they would show themselves on the moon. I believe that the moon would be the down go place, the go-to place. Why, I don't know, but I think the moon would be a place that it would go down on. Chances are you could probably see them in our atmosphere or flying around. I don't know, but that's a little hard to prove and stuff. But yeah, I don't know going all around on that. But yeah, I think there is life out there in the universe, and the Pleiadians. If you research on YouTube the Pleiadians, there's a lot of talk about the Pleiadians, and I'm really interested in the Pleiadians and stuff. If they really are true extraterrestrials that really do exist, they seem really interesting to want to find out more about. And every once in a while I think about watching some of the videos that talks about the Pleiadians. Do I think the moon landing was real? No. No, I don't. And listen why first, okay? Hear me out. I strongly believe that we did land on the moon, but it was not what they saw on TV. I believe that was staged, and the reason why I believe this is they streamed it on national TV of the moon landing, right? However, it would have been a big problem if something would have went wrong and the astronauts would have been killed or something devastating would have happened. It would have been a big devastation, I think, on NASA. I do believe they did go to the moon. I really do believe that they really did at one time land on the moon. But as far as what they saw on TV back in the 50s or 60s or something like that, when the Apollo landings were going on, I believe that those were staged landings, and I could be wrong on that, and I could kick myself in the ass later for thinking that. But I think a lot of my astronomy guys would be surprised to hear that I just said that I believe the moon landing was fake. But I do think we did go to the moon. At one point, I think we did go to the moon. I think we still do go to the moon. There probably is things on the moon that were left there and all that stuff too. But the whole moon landing, I think, was a fake that they saw on TV. I think it was staged, but they did go to the moon later on, you know. And I could be wrong, and if I am, so be it. But enough stuff that I know about the moon that I think I know from what I've heard is that the moon landing did happen, but it didn't happen on TV that day. So the last question is Planet X in NIBIRU, I think it is. Supposedly some planet that is going to crash into Earth. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, there is I don't have any proof of that. I haven't heard NASA say anything like that, but chances are if NASA admitted something like that was coming for our planet, you could only imagine the amount of chaos that would be going on before the final days. One thing I want to mention is and answer the question, no, I don't believe in that planet at all. But I will jump off and say before I end this video that about the flat Earth thing. I know a lot of people say that the flat Earth thing is a thing for NASA for the money they make to keep it a lie, that it's a flat Earth. I don't think it's a flat Earth. Yeah. So those are the questions that I've been asked. I might do another question and Q&A, I should say. Later on in the future, if I can think of some other ones that people ask a lot, because once in a while I do a stream on Periscope, or somebody will ask me, in the comments of the videos what my thoughts are on some of the questions that I did, or just questions in general, and I tried to put it in a video that ended up being almost a half hour long, which is the reason why I'm going to hopefully try to put timestamps in there for you to jump through to those questions and stuff, rather than having to listen to me rant. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you haven't become a subscriber today.